Hey, Sarah, testing here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Got it. Yep. Can you see the slides?
Yep.
Okay. It's working. Thank you. I think everybody got us taken care of. All right. And those of you joining early, welcome. Glad to see we got a nice group here. So looks like we're scheduled to start in about 7 minutes. Hey, the weather looks warmer in Jamaica. I got snow all around me. I could use some of that heat right now. Sarah, too. We're both swamped in snow here in the States. Sarah, is the presentation, is it full screen? Does it look like, I've never shared with Microsoft Teams before. Does it look like everything looks as it should, similar to WebEx?
Yep, looks good. I've got the presentation up and then I have the chat pulled up so that if people are asking questions, I can try to help field those too.
Super, thank you. Okay, good. We've got, oh yeah. Oh, hey, Maria, oh my gosh. How have you been? Former student, look at that. Who else? I need to check the chat log, yeah. Hey, glad that you could hop in too. Hey, thanks for joining. Hopefully you've been doing well. All right, there we go. It's officially 12:15. So welcome to our session. I am James Collins, and I'm here presenting with my incredible colleague, Sarah Aythorpe, who is the instructor for the UWW Life program, which is we're a post-secondary program for students who have an intellectual disability, for young adults who have an intellectual disability, and we work with them on our traditional college campus. And she knows a whole lot about behaviors, and so do I. We'll both be talking about these today and sharing some strategies that I hope will be useful. And in fact, when putting this together, we essentially went through the list and thought of what are the top strategies we could give in a 45-minute session. And these are the number one strategies that we can give you in the amount of time. So we hope that this will be useful. And again, it's our pleasure to present. We just wish we could have some of your Jamaican weather here in Wisconsin, in the States with us. So, and also with Sarah, she has taught internationally as well. She's taught in Ecuador and has a whole lot of experiences that I think you will find useful here. And she's also a graduate student at UWW. So, all right. So here's the topics that we'll cover today, and I'll cover the first kind of leg of this presentation, then I'll pass it on to Sarah, and then she'll pass it back to me for the to the very end of it. So this is tentatively our schedule. I know that we don't have a whole lot of time. This is really stuffing quite a bit in a 45-minute session, but in the event that we don't have enough time to finish everything, I'm not sure if the session's going to shut out on us at 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. your time, 1 p.m. our time. But in the event that it does, we have lots of details built into these slides that you could certainly take with you, and I will share these. We can find a spot to distribute them. I don't know if the link will be sent after, but I'll get these handouts to you as that option is made available to me. So anyway, looking at throughout the tools, the biggie that I'll be talking about is use of a token economy, which is a real general all-purpose behavior management strategy that you can use in the classroom, you can use it at home, you can use it in a variety of settings. And that's what, I think that's really, if I had to nail down one particular strategy, that would be probably the biggest one that I could recommend. But then we also wanted to cover some very specific strategies to supplement the work with the token economy. And a lot of those is what Sarah will be talking about today. And then we'll wrap it up with group contingencies to give you an idea of how you can manage behavior from a large group type of a scenario rather than working with students on an individualized basis, just a really efficient way to go about doing business. And just a forewarning that I'm a board certified behavior analyst, I'm a school psychologist, I'm a special educator, and we've used some technical language in the slides, but we'll make sense of this stuff as we talk through it. We want to keep it professional, keep some technical language in there so you can really get a sense for what all this is, but then we'll make sense of it for you using just common everyday language that I think would work well for teachers and parents and others alike. So that's the plan here for what we'll be following with our agenda. So first of all, before we get into the details, let's just talk about challenging behavior to begin with and why students misbehave. And I think that if you reflect on your childhood, your adulthood, I don't know, whatever it may be, there's probably reasons why you've behaved in the ways that you have. You might act a certain way when you want something. You might get grumpy. You might get upset. You might get sad. You might want to get other people's attention. Everybody's different. And I think that really points to why it's so important to figure out why a student is misbehaving. And that's what we'll begin talking about here very shortly. But really, we just want to know that we correctly identify the why, because, if I think that you're misbehaving or a student is misbehaving, say to gain attention from me, they don't, but realistically, they don't want my attention. That student doesn't like me. They don't want to talk with me. They don't want my attention. Maybe they want power. Maybe they want control. Maybe they want some access. Maybe they want out of my classroom so they can go play a video game or go play on the playground or just go hang out with their friends. Maybe they're misbehaving to show off to their friends to get some attention. There's a variety of reasons. So we need to identify what's called the function of behavior, and that's really the why. Why is a student misbehaving? And once we figure that out, generally speaking, we build our intervention, there's other ways to go about doing it, but my first recommendation is to build an intervention to address whatever that need is. So let's say that I'm the troublemaker in your classroom and I'm misbehaving to get attention. odds are the best thing to do would be to figure out a way to not give me attention for those bad behaviors, for those challenging behaviors, but then to give me attention whenever I'm doing the right thing. And it's something that really is, well, sounds common sense. It really is understandable, but it's so much easier said than done. Whenever you're in the classroom, you've got the student right there misbehaving. It can be a challenge to see those things. So bottom line, we try to figure out why, and then we build our intervention to address that. So if a student is wanting power, control, okay, they're not going to get it on their terms by wrecking my classroom or by creating this massive disruption, but I'll give them power, control on terms that work for me in my classroom. Maybe I can make that student a helper. Maybe I could give that student privileges to maybe go through and check to make sure that students have written down their homework assignments in their journal. We could do all kinds of things to give someone appropriate power and control on our terms. So we just got to take those terms away from the student. Remember, it's our classroom. Or for parents out there, it's your home. You want to make sure that your children are following your rules, and it's not their rules. And this is really what helps set the stage for that. So the other piece of this is when thinking about the function, the why somebody misbehaves, a lot of people confuse two words, and that's the consequence, meaning that like what happens after the behavior. Let's say a student misbehaves in a classroom and the teacher punishes the student. The teacher puts the student in timeout, or the teacher makes a student stay after class, or they send the student to the principal's office, whatever it may be. That's the consequence. That's what happened. But what is a really subtle but kind of similar but important distinction, a difference, is the function of that behavior. In other words, what did the student get out of that? Maybe the student wanted me to send them to the principal's office because they wanted to go home. Maybe the student wanted me to send them out of the classroom because they wanted to escape that horrible math that I was teaching, or that reading that I was teaching, or the writing instruction that I was teaching. Maybe that's exactly what they wanted. So what I thought was punishment actually was giving the student what they wanted. If you give the student what they want whenever they're misbehaving, odds are they're probably going to misbehave some more for you. It worked for them. So we don't want that to work. And that's what we've really got to stop. We want to make sure that those actions from the student aren't resulting in privileges, rewards, reinforcers, things like that for the student after the fact. That would kind of defeat the purpose. So I've given a few examples, thinking of a few examples, but think of a few of them in your own classroom or at home. What is it that you know that one student who's popping in your head right now, why are they misbehaving? And there's formal ways that we really determine that, but you can probably have a good hunch. But practically speaking, we have what's called a functional behavior assessment, where we look at looking at the antecedents, the things that happened before the behavior occurred. Maybe the teacher said, okay, students, it's time to get out your reading textbook. That happened before. That was the antecedent. And then the student's behavior, maybe flipping the table, saying something not so friendly, maybe refusing to do work. That's a behavior. Then we look at the consequence. What did the teacher do? And then what did the student get out of that? And if we can kind of understand those, control some of those variables, we can change behavior. And that's really the name of this game. So let's talk a little bit more about the importance of defining a behavior once we identify what it is that we're interested in changing. So let me just use an example that I think could make sense to some of you. How many of your spouses or significant others, your partners, have a different definition of clean than you? I can say that. My wife's definition of clean is very different than my own. And that's why it's important for, if we were to define, okay, she tells me I want the house to be clean by the time I get home. Okay, in my head, that might be taking a rag and wiping down a few things. Done. Not according to her. We need to make sure that we're using the same words to define what clean is. So that's what, in other words, that's what we call an operational definition. So the definitions that we use, let's say that we're looking at bad behavior or challenging behavior or aggressive behavior. What's that mean? It means something different to everybody, depending on who you're talking to. So we need to come up with a definition that's kind of like a rubric that lets you and I be on the same page. So I see it just like you see it. And in fact, it should be so clear of a definition that we could stand at opposite ends of a room independently, measure the same behavior, count the number of times that, say, a student is misbehaving or a student isn't doing their work. and we should come up with the same number at the end of that observation. And that's where something needs to be observable, measurable. Basically, if it's countable, then we can probably measure it. But what we're not wanting to measure are those things kind of within the skin. That's stuff that I can't see. If I'm feeling depressed, you might see some symptoms about that, but that's really difficult to measure. Just like on the slide, I've got an example there for a student feeling angry. No guarantees that you're going to know what that means with feeling angry. But certainly if the student is engaging in behaviors, they're punching, they're hitting, they're doing things that are aggressive, we can count that. We can count the number of time, the length of time that, say, a tantrum lasts. We can count the magnitude, really the intensity of a tantrum. Was it a low level, kind of a little mumbling, a low level tantrum, or a doozy where the student became physically aggressive and began, hurting themselves, hurting others? We can quantify that. And by doing so, that gives us an idea of once we intervene, is what we're doing working? Are we actually able to change that behavior or reduce the impact of that behavior in the classroom? So that's one of the big reasons why it's important to define a behavior. So you and I know what we're measuring, so we can collect data consistently and accurately between us. So as I said, that definition should be so clear that you and I could monitor it independently and come up with the same, meaning that let's say that the student misbehaved. I count about 10 times in the classroom during a 50-minute observation. You should independently come up with about that same number, that if we have a good definition. And in fact, if you don't, if you have two people in the classroom observing a student and both of you are coming up with really different number counts or different duration counts, like how long did that behavior last, odds are you've got a not so good definition, and you need to go back and look at the definition for whatever that behavior, whatever you're calling that behavior, to make sure that both of you are on the same page. In other words, making sure that both of you are measuring that in the exact same way. That way, in the event that the student moves, let's say that the student transfers schools, moves to a new city, to a new neighborhood, then their new teacher would be able to carry on the good work that you've begun. And it's really student-centric and making sure that we're doing the best work that we can. Also, the definition needs to be complete. It needs to account for all occurrences of the behavior. So aggression, if the student kicks, hits, spits, pinches, you name it, we need to include all of those different behavior types in the definition itself. So when it occurs, you, me, the principal, another teacher, we would all recognize it and say, yep, that problem behavior occurred right then. That's why that's so important. All right. So the other things are just some examples here of off-task. Off-task is one of the, I don't know if that's a term that's used over in Jamaica or elsewhere, but in the United States, that's a big phrase that is kind of a really ambiguous, fuzzy, unclear, just not so good of a definition for behavior. Because let's say a student becomes off task, he's not doing his work. What does that mean? Does that mean he's standing on his desk, that he's running around the classroom, he's throwing his pencil? What does that mean? I don't know. We've got to define it. So if somebody says that a student's off task, you kind of want to know, what's that mean? So does that mean that the student's refusing to complete their work? Does that mean the student's doodling on a sheet of paper, or the student is eloping? That's a fancy word for running away, kind of trying to just run out the door of your classroom, or all of the above. If so, that's what we define it as. That way, when I'm observing it, you're observing it, we're looking at the same things, and we'll be counting the same behaviors, monitoring the same behaviors there. So they're very specific, easily observed, and they're countable. I can count those. Therefore, they're probably going to be measurable, and that's what we're looking for. So now we're going to talk about some specific strategies. Particularly, I'll get into a token economy, and then Sarah will take over with some more specific strategies, beginning with Premack Principle, leading into differential reinforcement, all those different things. So the one for me, though, my big one, that if I had one choice to share with everybody, one topic, it's going to be a token economy. I personally, from my experience, and based on the literature, this is one of the biggest, I don't know if bang for the buck is a phrase in Jamaica, but it gives you a whole lot of value for the amount of work. You know, that some things you can put a whole lot of effort in to get a little bit of change. This is one of those that has a whole bunch of benefit for not a whole lot of work. It's a very efficient strategy to use. So a token economy, basically, if you think about what makes the world go around, it's money. And I even checked to make sure that these symbols, currency symbols, were the same in Jamaica. So wanted to make sure I connect with y'all using the right currency signals or the currency symbols like we use in the United States. But money, not that money's everything, but how many of y'all would show up to work if you got bills piling up and I don't know, and your school district told you you wouldn't get paid? I love my job. I got to take care of my business. I got to pay my bills. So money makes the world go round. Did you know that you can turn your classroom, basically, you can become a bank? What if you could print money in your classroom or at home? Sounds like a pretty intriguing concept, but that's exactly what a token economy does. You, the teacher, you, the parent, become almost like the bank, your local bank, and you print money. You create these tokens that you then distribute to your students, your children, whoever, and then they can exchange those for goods and services, just like we can purchase with real money. You know, and that's the really, that's at a simple, basic, most general level, that's exactly what we're doing. And certainly some people are intrinsically motivated. I am. Just for the record, I'm not, me nor Sarah, we're not getting paid to do this. We're doing this because we genuinely, legitimately want to help. But we have a long history of helping, and we've been rewarded for helping for a long time. We're intrinsically motivated, I would venture to say, because of our history in doing all of these things that we've discovered that we really enjoy. We've learned that helping people is rewarding for us, but it didn't start that way. We learned by getting, or at least I learned, I don't want to speak for Sarah, but I've learned from getting rewarded, earning things, and figuring out, oh, that's a good idea. Let's do that some more. And that's really what this whole thing centers on here. So setting it up, basically, you need to think about what are those big challenging behaviors that bother you the most, the really most disruptive in your classroom. And in fact, I would even suggest to pick the top three. Pick your three top things that are most disruptive, that if you could fix these, your classroom, your home life, and at home with your children would be so much better. Identify those three things. It could be aggression, it could be inappropriate language, it could be disrespect, whatever it is. Think about what those are, and then that's what we'll address. We'll build the token economy around improving those specific behaviors. And just for the record, I apologize if I'm missing anything in chat. I know Sarah said she's kind of taking care of that, and I'll check the chat once we get to a pause, and Sarah takes over. I just can't see it with all of I've got multiple monitors here, and can't see those. So my apologies if I'm missing something. But basically, after we identify those behaviors, you need to come up with a consistent method of rewarding students for doing those behaviors, for engaging in those behaviors that you want them to do, or avoiding those behaviors that you don't want them to do. And in fact, maybe if there's things that you don't want your students or your children doing, you could reward alternative behaviors instead of doing that bad thing you don't want them to do. Well, we could come up with alternatives that they can do. And that's some of the things that Sarah will be talking about here soon. So basically, how would you like it if I, pay you for doing good work? Sounds kind of like a job. Unlike what, I don't know how it is in Jamaica, but in the United States, a lot of teachers do this thing called card flipping, where kind of like a light, so like a stoplight, where students will start on green, they start their day with full privileges, but then as they make mistakes and then make some bad choices, they move to yellow, and then they have less privileges, and then they go to red. Well, the problem with that is you're taking things away, which for some students, honestly, that works. But I would recommend flipping that and having students earn those privileges. So basically, just like the real world, if I start off fresh, I come to Jamaica with nothing, I need to earn my way. I need to earn those privileges. I need to earn some money so I can buy some food. I need to earn things. That's exactly the way that you can structure your classroom. Rather than giving all of those those privileges, those really fun, high value things for free, why not have students earn them? They kind of start here, and then as they're collecting points, or like this money that we're talking about, these tokens throughout the day, tokens, points, they can be tallies, they can be paper clips, whatever you have that you want to award your students, just make sure that it's something that you can control, that they don't have access to. Otherwise, say if paper clips happen to be available at home, a student could bring out 1,000 of them and say, hey, look at all these tokens that I've earned. Want it to be something that you can control, that your student does or child doesn't have access to. So recommend rewarding students throughout the day, and then they can cash in those points or tokens or money at the end of the day for privileges that they value or items of value. So that's where it's just reframing the way that we often think about these things, at least in the States. I don't know how it is in Jamaica, but basically you think about what value a token is. A token, a tally, a stamp. You can have little, like star-shaped stamps that you can stamp on a card, kind of like if you go to, I don't know, you're at an amusement park, something where you can kind of stamp those the cards. You can do that with your students too. Each stamp can be like a currency. That can be like a dollar bill in the United States, even though it's not money. It can be treated like money and then cashed in for items or privileges of value. So you pay the student with these things. Basically, you're printing your own type of currency. So you can call it whatever you want. It could be a new form of, classroom currency, classroom bucks, whatever you want to call it. But that's what we would create. So initially, whenever we're developing a system like this, we need to reward the students fairly often, give students a lot of tokens at the beginning to really show them the value of listening to you, for following the rules. We want to show them that, not only can you get all these cool, fun things easier by following the rules, by listening to your parent, by listening to your teacher, but, we also want it to be, as immediate as possible. So students can see that, oh, I'm doing the right thing. Maybe they can even have some tokens, some poker chips, whatever you got that they can hang on to, that they can see, they can count, that they know they can buy something with these after the, at the end of the day. Even at the beginning, you could even have a classroom store, a little shop open up at the middle of the day, at the end of the day. We don't want to do that all the time. Over time, we want it to maybe once a week, at the end of the week, something like that is what I'd be working towards. But it's a gradual process getting there. But we want to make sure that students know that they're doing well. So put some graphs up, even get some social, can get some a little bit of peer pressure involved with that stuff too, by seeing who wants to be the number one student. And they can look at their graphs and look at their charts and see, it can be very motivating to compare one student to compare themselves with another student's performance. What if the top student in the class gets extra points, extra tokens? Can do all kinds of things to help develop these. So anyway, that as students get used to this process and you begin tapering how often you give them these tokens, how often you're rewarding them, because in real life, does your principal come, teachers out there, and pay you every hour or every minute? No, that's not the way that it works. So gradually, we want to move away from something, very often rewards to less often rewards, something that mirrors what happens in real life. Basically rewarding a student on a schedule that happens in the natural environment is the goal here. So we start rewarding very often and then gradually thin that schedule to where it becomes more aligned with the natural environment. And what you're doing there is kind of just like the same thing that makes casinos lots of money. It's random in nature, the way you're rewarding students. Now, maybe not every time that they do something right that you see them engage in that appropriate behavior, but every other time, every third time, every fifth time that they do it, nice job, token or point for you. And then you can go up to your board, add a tally mark, and then you can count the tallies up. Think of those tallies like dollars. Then they can cash those in at the end of the day. But just like points or tokens or tallies are meaningless unless they're associated with something. Just like money. You can have dollars, you can have a fat wallet, but it means nothing if you can't spend that on stuff. But it's because you've associated money with items of value that makes it valuable. And that's what we're looking at here. So this is just a quick example of a menu. But the bottom line here is you should have many more options in this audit. Think about what motivates your student. Does it motivate your student to have a little bit of spare time? I've had students who just wanted to take their shoes off for the day. That was motivating for them. You can come up with all kinds of different strategies to motivate your students, but if all else fails, ask them. Ask your students what motivates them to figure out what exactly it is that they're willing to work for, and you can come up with those. And then, of course, build those into your menu. Think of it like a restaurant menu. And then each of those things has values associated with it. So like right here, 5 minutes of extra computer time, 10 tokens. Adjust these however you like. But just make sure, my best advice here is to make sure you've got something really valuable to have your students working for. Could be teacher's helper, could be whatever. You name whatever motivates your students. I know lots of students who really enjoy having a pizza party, or some students I've even had students who would work really hard to get up in front of the class to tell some jokes at the end of the day. Whatever motivates them. come up with, as long as it's appropriate and on your terms, then that's fine. But come up with a menu, and that's what they can cash it in for. So basically, you've come up with the currency, and then you've come up with the shop, with the store that they can buy stuff with that currency. This works for potty training. This works for all kinds of things at home for parents out there too. Work just as well in that type of an environment. So there are some examples there. And the other thing that you can do here, being very consistent is important, because let's say, for instance, if you've got one family member rewarding good behavior, but then nobody else is, guess when the good behavior is probably going to emerge? It's going to be with the one family member or teacher who's rewarding these good behaviors that we're targeting. So we need to make sure that everybody's consistent. So all teachers who are working with that student need to be using the same system. And a nice advantage of this also is it works well with teachers and parents, because what we can do is, let's say that video games, TV time, extra time spent outside at home, whatever it is that really motivates that student at home. What if the student now the child doesn't get that for free? They've got to earn that preferred thing that they like to do at home. Well, that could be, just anything, playing games out in the yard, whatever it is, that could be earned by points that the teacher would award in the classroom. So maybe for every point that the student earns with the teacher, the student could cash that in for 20 minutes of their preferred activity at home. That's a way that you can really extend the long arm of the teacher into the home environment and improve the situation for everybody. And everybody wins in a case like that, including the parents and the student. And that's one of the beauties of using a token economy like this. So the example that I just gave is kind of similar to this with the video games. Kind of got ahead of myself. But basically, if you can connect parents with the plan, with the token economy that's being used in the classroom, it makes behavior management that much more simple. And I've had some of the best results whenever the parents have gotten involved with these. And what I would do is communicate with parents on a daily basis. At the end of the day, maybe I could send home a card with all of them. If I used a stamp with the different punches of each period of the day, maybe there were 8 periods that the student was in class. Maybe he got 4 stamps. Maybe he did a great job and really didn't engage in that challenging behavior. Or maybe he made really good choices, and I rewarded him for that. Whatever it is that we're targeting, then we kind of document that on the student's card or by email or by text, however you want to do it, by apps. There's all kinds of ways that you can document this, but just in a simple way, give the student a little punch card, take it home. Maybe the parent signs off on it, and then you start fresh the next day with a new card. And those points, those stamps, is what really gives the student access to privileges at home. It's a great way to go about doing it. And it improves collaboration with parents. So with that, which is something that I'm a huge advocate for, because, as a teacher, I certainly want to see students succeed, but parents that's blood. That's their children. They obviously are the ones who really want to see the students succeed too. So let's work together and be on the same team so we can really help that child in the best way that we can. So with that said, we're at a pause here. So let me just we don't have a whole lot of time. Let me take a quick pause here. I'm going to reflect on any chat questions we've got. And then from this point, Sarah will take over and we'll get into some very specific strategies here. So let me see what we've got. Hoping to send the presentation out at the end, have it written down your email. Yes, definitely. We can, we can share these there. Good. Well, appreciate the feedback there. And any questions, y'all feel free to send those in. But otherwise, I'll pass this off to my incredible colleague. And just for the record, I will be moving the slides. So if there's any mistakes here, that will be my end as I'm changing these things. So Sarah, you're up next. Here we go.
Awesome. So the first strategy that we're going to talk about is Premack. And we like to refer to this as Grandma's Law. So first we do the thing that we have to, and then we get to get a reward. We get to get something that we want. So just like how when you're maybe over at your grandma's house as a kid, they make you eat your vegetables before you can have dessert. We can do the same thing at school. In my classroom, a lot of the time, we will work for breaks. So maybe my students can get a little rowdy. I have long classroom sessions. So we'll work to finishing a certain assignment, and then we'll take a 5-minute break. And during the break, they can go on their phones, they can go to the bathroom, they can do whatever. And by doing it that way, they know that we can't just have a break whenever, but they have to finish the requirements first. And that has been super effective in my classroom. Next, I'm going to talk about some differential reinforcement, which basically is just looking at when you're going to reinforce a behavior. So there are different strategies for reinforcing the good behavior that you want at different times. So first is differential reinforcement of an alternative behavior. That is when you're reinforcing the behavior that you want instead of the behavior that's challenging or that you're trying to avoid having in the classroom. So in my classroom, I have a student who uses the bathroom during class all the time. And the function of that behavior, throwing it back to what we were talking about, figuring out the why, he wants to get out of the coursework. If it's hard, he doesn't want to have to try. So he'll go to the bathroom knowing that then he can put it off. So in my classroom, a differential reinforcement of alternative behavior would mean that I would give him a way to take a break without him going to the bathroom to avoid the work. So if he verbally requests a break, then he gets a 5-minute break. And that's a total break. I place no expectations during that time. But if he goes to the bathroom during class, we make sure that when he comes back, he has to do everything that he missed. If he's requested a break and it's a big assignment, I'll sometimes chop it in half for him when he comes back. But if he leaves without asking, then he for sure has to get it all done. So by doing that, I'm encouraging the positive, more appropriate behavior and discouraging the behavior that doesn't work so well in the classroom. Next type of differential reinforcement is for high levels of behavior. So that's when you're trying to increase how often a behavior happens in the classroom. An example of that may be at the home. You want to have your child help you with cleaning the house more often. So you could maybe right now, they're only cleaning up one item every night. So having higher levels, high rates of that behavior, then you could give them a reward or reinforce them after picking up 5 items before going to bed. And you can keep increasing what they have to do in order to get the reward. But by doing that, it's something that they already knew how to do. If they could pick up the 1 item before, they already knew how to do it. So by increasing the expectations, you're getting it to be a more appropriate behavior, which is really powerful. In the opposite, we have differential reinforcement of low rates of behavior. That is when you have a behavior that you want to happen less often. Maybe, again, in the home, when your child gets home from school, they request food every 5 minutes until dinner time. In that case, maybe you give them food if they request it less than 2 times. But if they keep requesting, they don't get any more food. So you don't want to make the behavior go away. Requesting food is an appropriate behavior, at least here in the States. That's a pretty common thing for students to have a snack after school. But you make sure that they do it in an appropriate way. You can't just request food all night long. You won't get anything. And there are examples on the slides here that Dr. Collins has written out for some classroom examples as well. I'm trying to give a variety of examples. Our last type of differential reinforcement is of other behaviors. So that's where you reinforce anything but the target behavior, any other kind of behavior except the thing that you want to stop. This one is tricky. We tend to only use it for severe behaviors because you can be reinforcing other things that you also don't want. So the example here on the slide is physical aggression. If you have a student who is, say, kicking, punching, and biting, and you're going to use differential reinforcement of other behaviors for those 3 behaviors, then you will reinforce every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes if they don't kick, punch, or bite, which means you could be reinforcing them running around the room screaming because that wasn't on your list. You could be reinforcing them leaving the room, eloping from the classroom, running away. You could be reinforcing them not doing any work. So this one you have to be really careful with. You need to make sure that you're doing it in an appropriate way. So I tend to only use this one for really severe behaviors, things that are really, really a problem in my classroom, because I don't want to reinforce other things that I don't want. It's always easier, in my opinion, to teach an appropriate behavior, and you can use this with that, but I would never use it on its own. You don't want to end up with inadvertently reinforcing and rewarding behaviors that you also don't want just because they weren't the target. On those same lines, we have non-contingent reinforcement. That is when every so often, maybe every 15 minutes, they get reinforcement, no matter what's happening. And the idea with this is if they have access to the thing that they're wanting. We talked about the function. They're always looking for something by doing a behavior. By using non-contingent reinforcement, they get that something regularly. They no longer need to act out to get your attention because they know that they will get attention regularly. They no longer need to elope from the classroom to take a break because they know that you will regularly take breaks in the classroom. So non-contingent reinforcement works well to sort of set them up for success. You're giving it to them no matter what, so that then you can focus on teaching the right behaviors and making it more appropriate. In my classroom, again, we do regular breaks. I have such a long class period that if I expected anyone to sit still and listen for that long, we would not be successful. So we take breaks pretty regularly. Typically about every 15 minutes, we'll take a short break. Not always do they get to go have a snack and go to the bathroom, but we will talk about other things. We'll get off topic occasionally. They think they're tricking me, but it's always on purpose so that we can work together and be successful. And this leads very nicely into the idea of motivating operants. When we are setting up the classroom to work for the student. Having some slide issues on my end. I'm sure they've changed, but they haven't on mine yet. I don't remember which way they are.
Yeah,
There we go.
Okay, a little bit of a delay.
All good. I knew that we had establishing operations and abolishing operations in a certain order, and I couldn't remember which way. So what happens before a behavior happens can change how much the reinforcement is worth. It can have a value altering effect, so it changes if the reinforcer or reward is more or less powerful. And it can also have a behavior altering effect, because if the reward would be less valuable, they're less likely to engage in the behavior. So our two types are establishing and abolishing. Establishing increases the effectiveness, and abolishing decreases the effectiveness. So an example of an establishing operation would be if the student has been working for an hour, they would be more willing to earn a break for reinforcement than if they had just come into the classroom. If you've got long chunks of time that they have been without a thing, then that thing will be worth a lot more for them. On the other hand, your abolishing operation, if they just came into the classroom and there had not been expectations prior to that, they're not going to want to work for a break. They just had a break. So instead, you want to work for something that is worth something to them in that moment. Maybe you want to work towards a physical, tangible reward. Maybe they like having access to something on their desk, a fidget or something like that. So that's how those work, sort of in balance with each other. Establishing increases the effectiveness and abolishing decreases the effectiveness. And the same thing can establish one reinforcer as more valuable and another one as less valuable. Now I'm going to throw it back to Dr. Collins to talk about our group contingencies, which is something that in a culture like Jamaica, where your whole classroom tends to be a really good solid group and everybody wants to work together towards a common goal, group contingencies can be awesome.
Okay, I see I was a little bit slow with the slide deck there. My apologies. Let me get through those. Make sure everybody could see a little bit, but we'll get these out to all attendees too from there. So yeah, and look at this. We're actually doing okay for time. So we got 5 minutes to go. I think we got this. So group contingencies are a very efficient way to manage behavior in your classroom, just as token economies are. So there's 3 types, and I'll go through each of them, but generally speaking, that with group contingencies, some common consequence is contingent, or meaning that it results from the behavior of one member of the group, say one student, part of the group, or everybody in the group. And there's different ways that you can arrange these, which are the 3 that I'll talk about here shortly. But it provides teachers or parents with an efficient way to administer reinforcers. And when we say reinforcers, that can be a token. Basically, a reinforcer is if you give the student something and you see their behavior, the desirable behavior increase, we can say that's a reinforcer. Let's say that if a student's punished, and it's really a punisher, we expect to see a behavior decrease. If we give the student something and the behavior increases, we're going to call that a reinforcer. So if it's a token, if it's access to a preferred toy, a preferred activity, whatever it may be, those are reinforcers. So it's just kind of a fancy word that we use in the realm of applied behavior analysis to identify those things that you like, or maybe even those things that you need, or that a student likes or needs with that, for that matter. So it's an efficient way to operate a class, to use in a classroom and at home. Let's say that you have multiple children at home and you want to make sure that some work gets done around the house, around the yard. You can do this too. Group contingencies are great. So let me get into these and help make sense of this. And they can capitalize on peer influence or peer pressure to that extent. So sometimes we got to be a little bit careful with these, but I'll explain that. And it definitely sets the occasion for peers, for the students, for the children, other children in the classroom, for other students in the classroom to act as change agents as well, to be part of that process. So the 3 types are dependent, independent, and interdependent group contingencies. Fancy words, but it's a pretty simple concept. Let me make sense of these things for you. So first of all, there's what's called a dependent group contingency. And you can read the text there that the reward for the whole group is dependent on the performance of an individual student or small group. Let me use a common example that I've seen a lot in classrooms. Let's say you got this one student who never brings in his homework, ever. And you got to get this guy to bring his homework in, but he just doesn't want to do it. What if the class might get some bonus points or something like that they get extra points, bonus, like there are all kinds of opportunities. We don't want to put too much pressure on our little non-homework turning in student, but let's say that we want to encourage this student to bring in homework. What if we offer the class a bonus, some bonus points, if this student were to bring in his homework? We got to be careful with that though, because that could get, say if the student doesn't bring in his homework, we don't want to get the student in a fight or any type of anything. We don't want to up the stakes that high, but it can be used to encourage the student to do the right thing and to have his buddies encourage the student to do the right thing as well. So it can apply a little pressure, and maybe if the student doesn't want to work for you, maybe he's willing to work for his classmates and other students who'd love to see him make a right choice here. That's one thing that you can do. And this is also known as kind of the hero contingency, because what if that student brings in his homework, everybody gets a reward, he becomes a hero for the day. So it can really help a student learn what to do and see the benefits for making good choices too. I love using those. Use them carefully though. I generally only use those with bonuses. Like I wouldn't do that I wouldn't consider giving or taking away one of the main points, say the tokens or points that the students get throughout the day. You better believe I'd probably be pretty comfortable giving a bonus point, extra points, if this student or group of students would bring in their homework. And what if I don't even disclose who the student is initially? Say I'm monitoring a secret student today, or I'm going to be monitoring a secret student. If this student brings in their homework tomorrow, everybody's going to get a reward. If the student brings in their homework, then you can announce their name and say who he is or whoever it is. Then if the student doesn't, you can say, sorry, the student who I was watching didn't bring in their homework, I'm not going to identify them. Let's say you want to keep them anonymous, so you don't want to, if you're afraid that the consequences might be a little bit rough for the student, then you can always keep them secret and only disclose their name once they bring it in, kind of get the best of both worlds with that. The other type is an independent group contingency, meaning that I say, okay, everybody, if you bring in your homework tomorrow, you're going to get a point. Doesn't matter if other students bring in their homework. All that matters is if you did. If you did the right thing, you made a good choice, then you get a point, or you get 10 minutes of extra recess. You get to take your shoes off in the classroom. You get to be my helper for the day, whatever it is, whatever reward that would be meaningful for that student or your classroom students, that's what you can do. It doesn't just have to be homework. What if I'm monitoring a secret student who is, let's say I've got a problem with students blurting out or just getting up and walking, roaming around my classroom? What if the contingency is that I say, okay, I need for everybody to stay seated. Those who stay seated for this next 10 minutes, you're going to get a point or get a reward. Those students who do it get a reward. Those who don't. I could do the same thing with a dependent contingency and monitor one or a small group of students to make sure that they are, in fact, if they make right choices, then the whole group will get rewarded because that one student or group of students did the right thing. So that's another way that we can approach it. And then the last type of contingency is what's called an interdependent group contingency, meaning that everybody needs to complete that task or engage in the appropriate behavior before anybody gets a reward. Basically, you're all in it together. So if everybody does the right thing, if everybody brings their homework in, then everybody gets a reward. But if everybody but one student brings in their homework, nobody gets a reward with an interdependent group contingency. They're in it together. They're interdependent, basically, and they're working on it together. And again, that can be a useful strategy that can capitalize on peer influence, and it can really encourage students to do the right thing. But you just want to be careful. You want to make sure that it's positive. Don't frame it as being punitive or negative. And you don't want any students getting any really horrible consequences from their classmates. But on the other hand, you can really frame this positively, and everybody's on the same team, just like my colleagues, just like with Sarah today. I was counting on her to be here to support me with this. We're in this together, just like in life, whether it's in business, as a family, you're in a lot of things together. You work together, you're supporting one another, kind of that same type of a thing, where either we all get something or none of us do. That's an interdependent group contingency. These can work well for your classroom, at home. Say I've used classroom examples, but what if the yard work needs to be done? What if things need to be clean and you've got a lot of kids, a lot of children around? Well, if they all do their part and they all pitch in, then everybody gets some type of reward. They get points, they get tokens, they get extra something that's meaningful for them. Then that can change masses of behavior across a lot of different people. And I already talked about the kind of the secret student, or those targeting students who you may not know who they are, but you can encourage them by monitoring somebody, or I'm monitoring a small group of students. If they do the right thing, everybody gets a reward. We can do that just as effectively too. So with that said, and yep, we're a few minutes after, but we stuffed a lot into this presentation. This is my contact info and my colleague Sarah's contact info. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and we'll hang out for questions after this as well. Once now that the session is wrapping up, we'll look through chat and answer anything that we can. But otherwise, as soon as we're done here, I'm going to be emailing conference planners a copy of this presentation, so this can go out to everybody who signed in. So we really appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us. And with that said, if you want to hang out and get some questions in, feel free. But otherwise, enjoy the day. Hope that y'all have an amazing Friday afternoon and a wonderful weekend. So take care and stay safe. So with that, let me move this away, go to stop sharing my screen, and then go to the chats here and see what we got. All right. Good. Appreciate the feedback there, Renee. Let's see. Nika, thank you. What have we got here? Let's see, Renee. The challenge we may have is finding the money to do token economy. Oh, yeah, you definitely don't have to have money. You can use privileges, access to things, anything that you've got that's a reward for the student. You can use that as your think of that as your currency, basically. And your tokens could just be tallies on the board, something like that. totally with that. So yeah, the funds, but even if you don't have money, think about what motivates your students, and that can really be what you come up. Oh, and that's yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah's already on top of this. Has already talked about those things. Great. She's been handling those. Wonderful. Well, thank you. Appreciate the feedback there. Got this. Let's see. Please remember the evaluation form. Yep. Thank you. Would appreciate that. And thank you for joining. Yeah, very meaningful help. We'll definitely play this. Good. Well, we're thrilled to help you. So thank you.
Just another comment about the token economies. I used that in Ecuador when I was teaching abroad. I didn't have any classroom funds because I was just the student teacher popping in and helping out. But they would actually get points against me. So they would be competing against the teacher, and then they would earn, one of my classes would work to earn playing soccer against me. It was unconventional, and I was horrible at it, but they love to earn that privilege. So you can do it with anything. Just points on the chalkboard, points on the whiteboard to earn privileges. Token economies work great.
Good. I appreciate y'all bringing these up. This is great questions, great feedback too there from the group. Can teach a second of my class. Hey, that sounds like everybody wins with that. Good deal. Okay. Well, I believe that looks like that's not getting any other questions here from everybody. But all right. Well, we have thoroughly enjoyed working with you. Thanks for the great turnout too. This is great. We had such a large, nice group of folks here, and I guess that will be it. So Sarah, I will get this presentation out to the attendees, and yeah, very good. Yeah, the evaluation link's there. Good. All right.
I'm hoping the moderator can send out the evaluation link. That's not something that Dr. Collins or I have access to.
No, I do not. That's right. Hopefully somebody here can send that out. Yeah, I'm not. Let's see. Do we have anybody in the? Yeah, we've got the CTC IT, the organizer, and Miss Radway is here. So good. Can I believe they can get those out to attendees. Should be able to. Very welcome. We hope to make it in person at some point. That would be a nice reprieve amidst all the cold weather up here now. Okay. Well, Ms. Radway, others who are conference planners, anything else from Sarah and I before we cut out of here? Oh, there we go. Looks like the evaluation link. There we go. Was just sent out. Thank you. Thank you for joining. That's right. Teamwork makes the dream work. I agree with that. Thank you. Okay. Well, I believe that is about it. Let me just check once more. Ms. Radway, other conference planners, anything remaining from Sarah and I before we cut out of here? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I will get that. I'll send the presentation out here momentarily. And again, thank you everybody for joining. Hope you have a wonderful weekend and great rest of the day. And thank you, Sarah, for joining me. Good work. Great work.
Nice to talk to everybody.
Hope to see you soon. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.